And there we were, in the heat of battle, with the Zulus charging towards us like a pack of wild dogs. But by God, we stood our ground and fired with all our might. The sound of gunshots filled the air, mixing with the cries of the fallen. It was chaos, pure chaos. But we held our nerve, we held our ground. And when the Zulus were finally stopped in their tracks, it was a victory like no other.
Rorke's Drift, just across the Buffalo River from Zululand, was originally a trading post and mission station, consisting of a small residence owned by Swedish missionary Otto Witt, as well as a tiny chapel and a few low stone walls and outbuildings. On January the 9th of 1879, 2 days before invading the Zulu kingdom, British General Lord Chelmsford encamped the troops of his center column there, in preparation for the invasion 2 days later. Chelmsford requisitioned the Witts' home, which he converted into a cramped hospital, and the chapel, which he turned into a supply depot. On the 11th, he left a small garrison of soldiers to watch over the post. Also occupying the post was a company of Natal Native Contingent, or NNC troops, under Captain William Stevenson. They were mostly Bantu and exiled Zulus, and these troops were poorly trained and sparsely supplied with outdated guns. Passing in and out of the drift was Major Henry Spaulding, who was the overall commander of the outpost. On the 21st of January, a small detachment of Royal Engineers, commanded by Lieutenant John Chard, arrived and began working on a pontoon bridge over the nearby Buffalo River. The following day, Major Spaulding left the drift to discern the whereabouts of a missing company. Spaulding left him in charge. That afternoon, 2 survivors from the fiasco at Isandlwana drifted in, Lieutenant Gert Adendorf of the NNC and a Natal carbineer. They told of the British annihilation that had happened a few hours earlier and warned that a Zulu impi, or military force, of about 4,000 men was quickly approaching the outpost. Now, hearing this news, Chard met with Brummett and Acting Commissary James Dalton to determine what the best course of action was. Dalton pointed out that if they retreated, burdened with injured soldiers, they would be overtaken in the open and cut down. Chard and Brummett agreed, and it was decided that the best course of action was to build a defensive perimeter and prepare for an attack. The 400 men there fortified the compound with mealie bags, which were bags containing corn, biscuit boxes, and crates of tinned meat. The perimeter connected the hospital, the storehouse, and a stone-enclosed cattle enclosure. Apertures were knocked in building walls to serve as firing holes, and the external doors were barricaded with heavy furniture. At about 3:30, 100 Natal native horse under Lieutenant Alfred Henderson arrived from Isandlwana. They were in poor shape and agreed to encamp on the far side of the Oscarburg hill that overlooked the fortress. A half hour later, the Zulu forces began to arrive. Now, they'd traveled about 20 miles in 8 hours and would spend the next 12 hours assailing Rorke's Drift. They were armed with assegai and shields, and a few had old muzzle loaders. While the Zulus generally disdained the usage of rifles, it's worth noting that 5 of the 17 British deaths at the drift were due to small arms fire. Their initial orders had been to move around the British at Isandlwana and cut off the retreat back across the Buffalo River. However, this was hardly necessary, as there was little of the British force left to retreat, and a relatively sparsely manned garrison, such as Rorke's Drift, was sitting just across the border. Now, leading the Zulus was Prince Dabulamanzi Kamapande, who was King Cetshwayo's half-brother. He was a rash and aggressive person. By attacking Rorke's Drift, Dabulamanzi was directly violating Cetshwayo's orders to act only in the defense of Zululand and not carry the war over the border into enemy territory. Now, the Zulus were first spotted by Surgeon James Reynolds, Army Chaplain George Smith, and Missionary Witt, who'd climbed the Oscarburg hillside to scout the area. Witt decided to depart, and he was hardly the alcoholic madman that the movie Zulu portrayed him as. Interestingly, shortly thereafter, Witt heard news that his wife had been killed while retreating several days earlier. Now, his wife, who was alive and well and staying with relatives, heard that Witt had been killed in the attack. And a number of days later, the despondent pair accidentally reunited with each other while passing on the road to the capital. At 4:30, Henderson's NNH troops were the first to come in contact with the Zulus. Now, they were spent and low on ammunition, and they saw the futility in staying. Seeing the NNH troops flee, Captain Smith and his NNC troops also fled. Now, anger at the fleeing British officers and NCOs boiled over along the firing line. A shot rang out, and fleeing Corporal William Anderson fell with a bullet through his skull, and he was the first casualty of the battle. Now, the loss of the NNC troops was not as big of a setback as it had been immediately perceived. Once the fort was under attack, space and resources would be at a premium, and the untrained troops would require ammunition, water, and medical attention that would soon be in short supply. The garrison of between 154 and 156 men was cohesive, and Chard quickly reacted to the situation by repositioning his men and building a low biscuit box wall through the middle of the compound in order to provide protection should the hospital be breached. Now, shortly after this, the first Zulus began to approach the south wall of the compound. About 600 warriors approached while the British fired at a range of up to 500 yards. Now, the British Martini Henry rifles had enough punch to put some pause in the Zulu charge and gently encouraged them to take cover. The Zulu forces then began to move around to the north side of the compound, some taking cover on the terraces of the Oscarberg, where they could snipe and harass the British position. Eventually, attacking from all sides allowed the Zulus to reach the walls of the fortification. Now, while the walls were a little too tall to scale, they allowed the warriors cover so that they could either grab protruding rifles or slash hands with their assegais. Eventually, the sheer number of Zulu bodies at the base of the walls gave them enough height to clamber over the tops. However, these attacks were driven back. Now, seeing the north wall would soon give out, Chard ordered his men to pull back behind the biscuit box barricade in the middle of the compound. Unfortunately, this action did cut off the hospital. Inside the hospital itself, the situation was becoming dire. A force of Zulus had pushed in from the east, and they were now attempting to get into the cramped building. And the hospital was made up of a crazy quilt of small rooms that would provide cover for both opponents. As the Zulus hammered on the main doors, the defenders ran low on ammunition and resorted to revolvers and bayonets. Now, at this point, it's worth noting that in order to heighten the drama of the situation, the movie Zulu portrays Private Alfred Hook wrong. They portray him as a lazy malingerer, and the real Private Hook was known as a superlative soldier, who was tasked with guarding the injured soldiers of the hospital, and he fought bravely in their defense. The British troops were essentially trapped in the building, and Private John Williams began to hack through the walls in order to escape to another room. And he was eventually able to do this through several other rooms, and eventually reach one that had an outside window that allowed egress to the compound yard. Now, the hospital defenders were able to drag the wounded out of this window and dash across to the barricade. Now, this was all an incredible act of valor, as during this time the thatched roof of the hospital was also set ablaze. Of the 11 infirm patients in the hospital, 9 survived, and only 4 of the defenders were killed in the hospital. As night fell, the Zulu attacks intensified. The cattle kraal came under heavy assault and was evacuated by 10 p.m., leaving the remaining men in a small area in front of the storehouse. And it wasn't until midnight that the Zulu attack began to die down. By 2 in the morning, the only attacks were a harassing fire that forced the British soldiers to keep their heads down, and this died off at around 4 a.m. When dawn broke, Chard's forces had sustained 14 deaths, with 2 mortally wounded and 8 seriously wounded, though nearly every man had sustained some type of injury. Of the 20,000 rounds that had initially been stored at the mission, only 900 remained. And as the sun came up, the Zulus were nowhere in sight. So Chard ordered several of his exhausted men to scout the area, and in the gray light they recovered rifles, looked for survivors, and bayoneted any wounded Zulus that they came across in the vast field of bodies. However, at around 7 a.m., the impi suddenly reappeared, causing the scouting parties to flee back to the compound, and straining the nerves of everyone. However, no attack was forthcoming. The Zulus were tired and hungry. They'd been force-marched for 6 days and hadn't eaten in 2. After 12 hours of fighting, the only energy that they had left was to quietly retreat back the way they came. They left 351 Zulu bodies on the battlefield, though many, many more wounded were left behind to die. A final estimate was that nearly 500 Zulu warriors died as a result of the battle. At 8 a.m., another false alarm roused the garrison, as the vanguard of Chelmsford's mangled column came into view. Now, Chelmsford's attention was focused on any survivors of Isandlwana that might have taken up refuge at Rorke's Drift. Now, finding out that none survived, I think he was probably more concerned about how the optics of the situation were going to personally reflect on him, and he quickly departed for Pietermaritzburg with his staff officers. Alrighty, this week's game is Zulus on the Ramparts, the Battle of Rorke's Drift, and it was published in 2009 by Victory Point Games. Its designer was Joseph Miranda. Now, the game map represents the mission post at Rorke's Drift, and there are 4 numbered paths that converge on the red boxes, and those red boxes represent the area that the British are trying to hold. The 4 paths are delineated with small circular markers, and they represent the 4 different regiments, or ibutho, that make up the Zulu army, or impi, and they symbolically correspond to the parts of an attacking buffalo, and they include, going clockwise, the left horn, the loins, the right horn, and the chest. Now, as Zulu on the Ramparts is a solitaire game, the players will take the role of the British defenders of the mission, and they control a hand of cards that represent events that took place during the battle, British heroes that fought in defense of the station, groups of combatants that serve as potential allies to the defenders, and volleys, or attacks on the Zulu. Now, cards can exist in 4 places during the game: in the draw deck, in the player's hand, on the table, or in play, and finally in a discard pile. And during the game, cards will be drawn from the draw deck into the player's hand. Hero cards can then be removed from the player's hand and placed on the table, and the heroes on the table can perform certain actions, usually resulting in them being placed back in the hand or discarded to the discard pile. Now, event cards impose special rules on the game, such as Nightfall or Chelmsford showing up in the game ending. Now, looking at a hero card, there's several sections below the hero's picture. Most of the heroes have a volley fire area, which shows the range and die for a volley attack, as well as these pink and yellow areas. Now, the pink areas are an action that the player can take at the cost of that hero being sacrificed and the card thrown into the discard pile. The yellow area is an action that the player can take, and after doing so, the hero card is placed back into the player's hand. And if the background behind the area is blank, when the hero takes an action, a continuous effect occurs. Finally, if the Major Spalding card takes their specific action, they're placed back in the middle of the draw pile. Now, groups function much like heroes, though they can only be played during certain times of the game. Now, there's also volley cards, which have a range and die number on them, and can be used to damage the Zulu units. And they're played from the hand, and discarded after volley resolution. Now, the Zulus are represented by markers on the board, and each ibutho has 1 to 5 counters that are stacked together under a standing counter and placed on their respective track for the attack. During the game, as they take damage, these counters will be removed, and if all the counters, as well as the associated standee, are removed, then that ibutho is eliminated. There's also a number of Zulu counters that, when drawn, represent specific events during the game. So to prepare the game, take the 4 ibutho standees and place them at random on the 4 number 5 boxes of each attack path. Then place the corresponding markers associated with them. Note that the rectangles on the standee correspond to these markers, with the striped rectangle representing the standee itself. Then place the Zulu victory marker in area number 0, the outer perimeter, the ammunition water low marker with the -1 die roll modifier side on its square, the day-night marker day side up, the reserve platoon, Natal native contingent, Natal native horse, and G company in their respective boxes, as well as the barricade build markers in their place. Then place all the round empty markers in an opaque container such as a cup. Finally, you set up the deck. You remove cards 3, 4, and 5, that's Lieutenant Chard, Bromhead, and their coming, from the deck, and the player then places them in their hand. Then the player takes cards 1, the Chelmsford relief column, and 2, the night fighting begins, and sets those aside. Now, for the basic game, you form a deck with cards 2 through 31, and you shuffle those thoroughly, removing 4 cards without looking at them. You place the Chelmsford card in this stack and you shuffle it, and you place this stack down to form the bottom of the draw deck. Then you place about half of the rest of the deck down on top of this. Then you place card 2, the Nightfall card, on this, and then place the remainder of the deck on top of this to form the draw deck. Thus, you should have a night fighting card about halfway through the deck, and Chelmsford randomized in the bottom 4 cards of the deck. Now, the game consists of an indeterminate number of turns, and it's basically played until either the Zulus are destroyed by entering the appropriate victory box, or by all the Zulu counters being eliminated, or Chelmsford showing up. And thus, the game can last from just a few turns and a few minutes to many turns or about half an hour. And the sequence of operation is as follows. First, an MP counter is drawn from the container, and then the instructions on that MP counter are carried out. The player then carries out their actions. They then draw a card from the draw pile to their hand. In the 5th phase, a British heroes put forth, and putting forth means they're moved from the player's hand to the table. Finally, there's a discard phase where cards in a player's hand in excess of 5 are removed from play and placed in the discard pile. Let's work through each phase in turn. The first phase is where you draw the Zulu counter from the container. So at the beginning of each turn, a single MP counter is randomly selected from its container, and the action on that marker is carried out, and then that marker is placed in a discard stack. Now, the most common markers are the advance markers, which indicate which Zulu units can advance along their trail and for how many squares. Now, all of the Zulu stacks corresponding to the symbols shown in red must move the number of squares indicated by the red number. For instance, in this case, both the stacks in the right and left horn track would move forward 2 squares. Now, note that all counters in a stack always move together. Now, if a stack of units has been eliminated or routed, you ignore the advance for that unit on that turn. Though if the advance involves multiple units that are still in play, they can continue to move. Now, all the Imbuthos stacks can move into the red interior squares, though they can't stack together in these squares. Further, they can't cross over or bump forward Ibuthos that are ahead of them. And to avoid traffic jams, the Ibutho on the lowest numbered box moves first, followed by the Ibutho that has the highest strength, and if these two are equal, the Ibutho that started the game with the most units that goes first. Now, once a stack enters the Zulu victory box, the game ends with a Zulu victory. Certain other squares can also block the advance of the Ibutho stacks. If the hospital, which is on the chest track, square number 1, or storehouse, which is on the right horn track, square 1, is on fire, the Ibutho has to stop in that hex for that turn, and they can only move out on the next turn that they're allowed to move. Now, certain heroes can also stop Zulus in their tracks. Hook, for instance, can take an action and place the Hook standee into a hospital square if it isn't burning. And if an advancing Zulu stack attempts to move into that hospital square, a die 6 is rolled. If the result's a 5 or 6, the Zulus remain in place. If it's a 1 to 4, the Zulu stack moves into the hospital zone and stops. Now, the Hook standee is removed, and Hook's hero card is placed back on the table. Now, a similar situation can occur with Shice on the north wall and Dalton in the storehouse square, though in the case of Dalton, the Zulus stop on a 4 to 6. The R Zulu advance marker indicates a Zulu retreat, and it applies to all Zulu units on the board. If the stacks are on squares 2, 3, 4, or 5, they regain 1 hit marker, though they can't exceed their starting hit status. If they're on box 2 or lower, they move back 1 hex, that is 1 hex higher, and if they've been routed, they're returned to box 5, though they don't gain any hit markers. Now, during a turn that starts with an R marker, the British perform all actions normally, except they can't use a volley card during that turn. Essentially, what's happened to the Zulus have gone to ground. There's also a number of other Zulu event markers, and I'll only describe those briefly. Now, if the fire marker is drawn, you roll a die, and you consult the Building Ablaze table to see if either the hospital or storehouse catch fire, and you place a fire marker in the box associated with them. When the buildings are on fire, the hero standees are removed from the building and their cards placed back on the table, and volley cards can target units in the same box as the fire, who always stop movement when entering the firebox. Now, volleys can't fire at boxes that extend beyond the fire. Thus, if the hospital was on fire, box 2 of that track couldn't be targeted. Now, units in a burning box always retreat on a 5 or 6, and we'll talk about retreat shortly. Now, the Inyulengwe forward marker moves the Inyulengwe forward 2 boxes. And if Dabulumanzi is drawn, roll a die and return that number of advance markers back to the cup from the discard pile. And this doesn't include events or R markers. And this marker is returned to the cup during day turns and discarded during night turns. And now if Rifles Overheat is drawn, you draw a second event marker. And if it's an action marker, you follow the instructions. If not, return the marker to the cup, ignoring its effect. And for the remainder of that turn, British volleys have a -1 die roll modifier. If the seniority debate is drawn, a number of hero cards are returned from the table to the player's hand, and those include Chard, Bromhead, Dalton, Bourne, and Windridge. However, they do remain on the table if they're working on a barricade or forming the reserve platoon. In addition, the remainder of the turn is skipped, and the player doesn't get to take any actions, put forth heroes, etc. They do get to ignore the maximum hand size of 7 cards during this turn, and after the turn, the seniority marker is discarded. Now, if the Washing of Spears marker is drawn, you move all stacks back 1. Now, in this case, they can't retreat past box 5. Further, if they're in the compound interior, they can push other units back with them. And again, this marker is discarded after play. Now, the Zulu sniper marker functions much like the Rifles Overheat marker, except that the player draws until an advance marker is drawn and follows its instructions. Any events markers are ignored and they're placed back in the cup, along with the Zulu sniper marker, after the player has played the Zulu advance. Now, if there's no advance markers remaining in the cup, you move all stacks ahead 1 space, and like Rifles Overheat, volleys are at a -1 die roll modifier for the rest of the turn. Now, once all empty markers are played, all advance markers and any event markers that can be returned to the cup are returned. Next is the action phase. Now, there's a number of actions that a player can attempt during a turn. Generally, they can attempt 1 normal action a turn and any number of free actions. Now, free actions are actions performed by the heroes that involve their special abilities, and any number of free actions can take place in a turn. However, the heroes must be on the table, and once the free action is taken, their card will usually, but not always, be either discarded or returned to the player's hand. For example, if Bromhead decided to lead a heroic volley, you would roll the volley die roll for his card, and then move his card to the discard pile. Now, there's 6 things you can do with a normal action. You can put forth a hero, which simply involves moving a hero card from the player's hand to the table. And remember that heroes can't perform actions from the hand and must be put forth on the table to do so. Now, if a card's put forth, that hero is then free to perform a free action during that turn. Second, you can fire a volley. Now, to fire a volley, the player chooses a single stack, and they play a volley card from their hand. Now, the box number of the booth, though, is the range, and the player rolls the number of d6 as indicated by that range. Die roll modifiers are added or subtracted, and the final result is then applied. Now, every die that results in a 1 to 4 usually counts as a miss. Every 5 causes a stack to move back 1 box, and this can be cumulative. And every 6 indicates the removal of 1 hit counter from the Zulu stack to the casualty box. And units in a burning box always retreat on a 4 or 5. Now, range is always equated with the box number of the Zulu stack, though units at the -1, 0, and 1 boxes are always at close range. Now, remember that British units must always fire on the unit in the closest box, if there are a number of stacks in the -1 or 0 boxes. Now, if a stack is forced to retreat beyond the 5 space, they're routed, and you place them just off the 5 space, and while they retain their hit markers, they can't interplay until an R-MP marker is played. Now, when one of the ammunition or water low or night markers are on the map, or the rifle's overheat or Zulu sniper event chits occurred that turn, you subtract -1 from the single highest die roll result each volley. Now, if multiples of -1 die roll modifiers apply that turn from the above list, then 1 is subtracted from each of that many of the highest die roll results in a volley. Heroes can also order a volley fire as a free action, but they're discarded after doing so. And if more than 1 volley occurs in a turn, each one is resolved separately. Now, the third action that a player can perform is to distribute ammunition or water. Now, at the start of the play, the ammo water counter is placed on its -1 side, which incurs a -1 die roll modifier to all volley fire. However, if a hero spends a normal action, they can turn this counter over, and the negative die roll modifier no longer applies. The fourth action is to fight a fire. If a building's on fire, the player can spend a normal action to attempt to extinguish it. And a hero is chosen to lead the effort, and they're placed from the table to the player's hand. A roll's then made on the fire table under the firefighting action, and the result is applied. The fifth action is to build 1/3 of a barricade. Now, barricades can be built between the 0 and -1 boxes, and the -1 and -2 boxes. And these allow the player to move the Zulu victory marker 1 box to the right each time a barricade's built. Thus, if 1 barricade had been built and the victory marker was on the -1 box, the Zulus would win the game if they moved into that box. However, if a second barricade was built, the Zulus would win by moving into the -2 box. Now, barricades are built in thirds, with each third requiring an entire action. Thus, it would take 6 actions to build both barricades and move the victory marker to the -2 position. To start to build a barricade, you simply place a lieutenant or sergeant in the barricade box, expend the action, and place the 1/3 marker on the board. A second action will allow the marker to be changed to the 2/3 built, and a third will allow the player to move the Zulu victory marker to the -1 position. Now, note that barricades do not have to be built in consecutive turns, and the hero overseeing their construction can be removed from the barricade box without any sort of penalty, and either they or another hero can come back to it at a later turn. Finally, the Commit Reserve Platoon command is a special command that allows a particularly deadly volley fire. Now, it requires a number of things to be done before it can be performed. First, the low ammunition marker can't be in play. Second, a lieutenant and a sergeant or 2 lieutenants must be moved from the table to the reserve platoon formation box, and this is a free action. And then the first reserve platoon card must be played. Now, at that point, the platoon is assembled, and as long as the NCO officers duo are reserved, it stands ready to fire. And it fires once the second Commit Reserve Platoon card is played. And this also counts as 1 action. Now, at that point, the volley can be resolved, and the reserve platoon is then removed, and the leaders go back to the hero's table. After the action phase is a card draw phase. Essentially, the player draws 1 card from the draw pile to their hand. This is followed by a hero phase, and during the hero phase, a hero or a group can be put forth from the player's hand to the table. Now, this is a free action, unlike putting forth during the action phase, and the hero is free to engage in an appropriate free action during this phase, which could send them right back to the player's hand. Finally, there's a housekeeping/discard phase. Now, if Sergeant Bourne's on the table during this phase, the player can have any number of cards in their hand. If he's not, the player has to discard any volley cards in their hand in excess of 5. And note that group and hero cards don't count towards this hand size. Now, once the night turn card is drawn, you turn over the night turn marker. And volleys are now fired at a -1 die roll modifier for the rest of the game. However, this effect is ignored if at least one building is on fire. Now, there's several ways a player can win or lose this game. If all the Zulu stacks have been eliminated or routed, the player wins. They can also win if the Chelmsford card is drawn and the Zulus haven't yet reached a victory marker. If a Zulu stack makes it to the square containing the Zulu victory marker, the player loses the game. Alrighty, this week's game, Zulus on the Ramparts. This will be the last of my Anglo-Zulu War series that I've done this month. And the Vassal Module is nice because it's pretty much set up. There's a few kind of tricky things that can kind of happen with it that I'll kind of show you as we go through, but for the most part it's pretty developed. The board, the Zulus the Abuthos are set up on the board in their 4 respective positions. If you want to randomize them differently, you can, but I'm just going to leave them where they're at. I think that'll work pretty well. It could play a little different if you had, say, your most powerful Abutho here and a weaker one here because of the hospital, I guess. That could even things out a little bit. Or the storehouse, I guess, burning and throwing things down. So I guess this would be probably, well, yeah, I'm not sure which. In the advanced game, the crawl can be blocked, but we're just going to play the basic game just to kind of show you guys how things work. Anyway, enough rambling. Let's set up the card deck, and this is where things get a little more complicated. What you're going to do is, this is where your deck's going to be, right here. We're going to build that deck, and this Chelmsford's relief column, which is supposed to be when the game ends, we're going to put it over here, and then we're going to send 3 cards to the main deck and shuffle them. Now, that means that Chelmsford's relief column will be in those bottom 4 cards, somewhere randomized. Then we're going to send half to the main deck. And then we're going to take that night fighting begins, and we're going to put it there. So it's halfway through, and then we'll send the rest to the main deck. Okay. And that's it. It's set up. The rest of those cards are for, again, the advanced game. We've got our hand right here, and we've got Chard and Brummid and 1 volley set up there. So that'll get us started. And I noticed in the history I said Bromhead. It is Brummid. That's how they traditionally would pronounce it. I think on the other videos I did okay on that, but on this one I messed up. So apologies to those folks out there that are into the history of this. Okay. Nice thing about this is it has the reference sheet here, and so we can see how the phases are going down. And we'll just go ahead and set that over here. So we're going to start with the Impy phase, and we're going to go to our cup, and we're going to draw 1 out. And basically we get the loins are going to move 2. So moving our loins to, where's our loin? Here they are, right here. We move them up to here. Okay, and that's it. And we'll just hold that aside. Then we're going to go to our that was phase 1 was the Impy phase drawing, and the Imbutho phase was doing whatever the little Imbutho chit did, or the Impy chit did. Okay, next we go ahead and we are going to do a British action phase. Now we look at our hand, and I think I'm going to play we're going to go ahead and play Chard forward. Okay. And when I play him forward, I can go ahead and use one of his free, that's my action, and then I'm going to use one of Chard's free actions, which is to return back to my hand, and then that will give me 1 additional card, because I have 3 or few cards. So we'll do that. And so now I'll get to draw 2 cards during my card draw phase. So I'm going to do that and that. And oh good, I got Born. And then I'm going to bring Brummid. I've got my free hero phase. I'm going to put him 4th. And now with Brummid, let's pop this up just a little bit. There we go. Yeah, let's pop it back down. And we're going to go with, let's try 60%. That looks a little better. Hopefully you can see a little better that way. Okay, so I'm going to take Brummett and put him fourth, and then I'm going to perform one additional action at this time and move him right back to my hand. He goes back and forth to the hand a lot, so I'd use the little controls here, but the problem is that sometimes the cards disappear, so we'll try to do that. And then this guy is Here They Come, black as hell, thick as grass. I'm going to go ahead and play that volley. And let's just play my volley, because I'm going to play it against this Imbutho here. So I get 3 die, and I roll, and I get, ooh, a 6, a 5, and a 6. So I take out 1, 2. Those are limit. That's a really good roll. And then he's going to move back 1. And this goes to the discard pile. And then I check my hand. I'd normally check my hand. And do I have 5 or more cards? No, so I just have 1 here, and then I've got these guys. Okay, and that ends the first turn, so it's pretty quick. Let's go second turn. We'll pull a chip, and this time we get both horns get to go too. Let me take a swig of coffee. It's been really cold here the past few days. We were down to -12 the other day. It was really cold. So this hot coffee tastes pretty good. The nice thing about retiring is you don't have to go anywhere. Okay, so those guys get to go there 2 and 2. Now, we're going to check our hand out here. And again, I think I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to put chart in. And actually, let's go to hand here. This is where, not hand, heroes. Here we go. There, that's the appropriate place to put it. So we're going to put chart in, and then he's going to get his action. And this time, I'm going to distribute the water and the ammunition, so we'll get rid of that. That's one of the first things. First 2 things I think I would do as the British to help is get this switched over and then build those barricades, because that's going to give you a little more breathing room. That's where I think the game does a pretty good job. I'm not a big fan of this designer or a lot of the Victory Point games. Their games weren't bad, but I think the rules were oftentimes kind of a mess. But and the designer, I think he does a pretty good job. Some of his games are really good, but some of them he's a very prolific, so some of them just seem to be kind of rattled off quickly, and so you kind of got to watch that a little bit. I guess that's kind of soured me on some of his games. I have played a couple that are good. This one's actually not bad, but okay, anyway, enough nattering. Char's done his thing, so we can draw a card, and we'll go back to our hand, and we hit the draw card. Okay, fixed bayonets isn't bad to have. Okay, now gonna move Brummett in and give him an action. I think at this point now, Born is nice because I can have more than 5 cards in my hand. Downside is I don't really think I'm gonna need 1, 2, 3 more. 3 more draws before that's even going to be a point, so we're not going to worry about that quite yet. But I think I'll have Brummett work on this. It gives me an action. Now this is kind of weird, because if I give an action, he could build a barricade, 1/3 of a barricade, but then he has to move back to my hand, so he's not actually in this. I think that is, from my interpretation of rules, that is legal. So we're going to move him back, and we're just going to say 1/3 of the barricade is built. And we'll just stick it right there. Okay. And that's the end of turn. So we can go to our next turn. And we will we'll go back to the Impy. I'm moving kind of slow here to just kind of show you how this works. Now this is Campande d'Abulumanzi. And basically we're going to roll die and return that random number of advance markers into the Impy Cup. And then I put him back in the Impy Cup because it's still day. So we'll just roll. We get a 1, so we move 1 back. Now which one? I think this one's the better one to put in because it's weaker. So we'll put those guys here and those guys here. That doesn't really help the Zulus any. Let's see here. Okay, then we're going to go to our hand. And I mean our hand. Let's see, heroes. Chard could do his thing. He gets an action. Okay, I think what we're gonna do here is we're gonna play Chard as an action. Let's go out here, and we're gonna play Chard as a barricade builder. And he's gonna build barricade, and we'll just turn it, rotate it here. Okay, and you can put him on the barricade box. He doesn't have to go back to the hand while he's building the barricade, so. Actually, he might have to. I'm not sure. Anyway, he can sit there and build barricade. I guess I wouldn't have had to put... oh, yeah, I did because of extra action for Brummett. I was trying to think out, so... Keeping everything straight here. Okay, and so that's our action. It's building barricade. We're at barricade 2. Okay, now we're going to go back to our hand, and we're going to draw a card. And we get Steady Lad Steady. A sergeant or lieutenant must be available, and it lets me get another discard, a volley fire. Oh, okay. Hey, that's not a bad thing. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and move Brummett in. And we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to have him build. We're going to send him back to the hand and build the barricade. So he does that, and that finishes the barricade, and I get to move the Zulu victory marker there. And he goes back to my hand. Okay, that's it. That's it for turn. And we can put, we'll leave Chard in place. Okay, we go to our next Zulu phase, and we get 2 from the loins up here. And he goes in place here. And then the we can play at this point. I might play the special events to get that volley marker back. I think let's check that volley marker. This is a pretty nice. Here they come, black as hell, thick as grass. It's kind of a nice one to get. So I'm going to go ahead and discard that one. That's my turn, and then or my action, and then I'm going to bring back this guy, or nope, not him. Here. And I think that's my action there, and I guess I have a lieutenant not doing anything, so he's able to do that. So there's my action. We draw a card. And, ooh, volley fire by ranks. This is a good one. If they're close, we're in pretty good shape for close fire. But we can't do anything else. Now we can move Brummett into my hand. I can move Born into my hand. So I think we'll do that. We'll move Born into my hand. Where are my heroes? I'm sorry, not my hand. From my hand to my heroes. And I guess we can move him. We can move Chard back. Okay. So now we have unlimited hand size. I don't know if I guess we can pull stuff down if we need to. Okay, and then that was it for turn because we moved Brummett, or we moved Born in. Okay, we go to our next turn. We pull an empty chip, and we get the. This is the sniper chip. Let's check our just show it. And with the snipers, we draw another chip, and if it's an advance, we stop drawing and do that. And we basically draw until there's an advance comes out and implement it normally. And the die roll modifier is -1 for the rest of the turn. So okay, so we're gonna we'll put this aside, and we'll see. We can there's our advance, so we can move that in. And basically, the left horn is going to go 2, 1, 2. Oh, that's not good. Okay, so we're in the 1 space, and we have a -1 die roll modifier. So I think we're going to try to chew up the Zulu. Let's see. We're in the 1 space. This one would be fixed bayonets would be a good one at this point. I don't think I want to go quite with. We're going to save volley fire by ranks here. And after firing, okay, so let's do that. Now we have a -1 die roll, so our 4 die we're going to subtract from the highest. and that's going to be a 4. So basically, we just have a 5 in there. And we didn't chew him up as bad, but we sent him back 1. So we can discard that. That was our action. We go to our hand, draw a card. Another volley fire by ranks. Okay. And then we can move Brummud forward. I'm gonna move him into my hero. I'm gonna move him to heroes and then back again, and give me an action. And I'm gonna do independent fire at will. Now again, I still have that -1. Yeah. Okay. So basically, that 6 is minused, and so it's gonna be a 5 and a 5. We're gonna move him back 2 more. That's fine. Okay. Next turn. We get a, oh, they do it again. Okay, so we're going to draw till we get an advance. Dablamanzi, I don't think those count, so. And then we got, okay, both horns get to move. So they get to move 2. Not a good one. Okay, and he's at the storehouse. And now we take an action. Well, what can we do? We could try to build again here. Or let's see what we've got. Born is doing his thing. Chard is we have more than 3 cards, so his thing doesn't really work. And I'm at -1 the rest of the turn, so I think firing's going to be kind of a moot point. So let's go ahead and build barricade. I think that's going to be our best course of action here. And so we'll say 1/3 build. We go to our hand, yeah. Draw a card. Not bad. And then we're going to do the old Brummud thing. We're going to take him out and move him back. So he's going out, uses his return action, gives us an additional action. Going to use that to build the barricade. Okay. And that's the end of turn. Draw an MP chip. Whoops. And we get 1 from the chest. The chest hasn't done anything yet, so we're going to move him forward 1. And that moves us into our next turn. I think during this turn, what we're going to do for our hero is, or we're just going to fire a volley. This guy's pretty open, and we're at full strength now. So check our hand, and we're going to do the volley fire by ranks with 5. And so we'll discard that, and we're going to roll 5. Okay. Well, we did 1 hit. So we pull him off, and that's it. Nothing else. Okay. We're going to pull a card. And we got on guard. And then I think I'll do the Brummud. I'll move Brummud in and out and use the ready on guard against this guy right here. And we'll do it again. And we get a 2 6s and a 5. So removes 2 of these guys, and then moves the stack back by 1. Okay. So far, so good. Next turn, we get a 1 from the chest, so the chest moves to 3. Take an action, and in this action, I think Chard will finish the barricade, so I'll move him back to my hand. Oops, not my hand. My hero, the table, I guess, is probably the best way to say this. So he's on the table. Okay. We draw a card to our hand, and we get this. Okay. We get Windridge, and then playing forward, Let's see. I think I might use him. I might use him if there's a fire or something. We'll do the old Brummud thing again here. We're going to move Brummud out, take the action, and go back. And this time I think... Who's in the 3 position? I think we're going to go ahead and use Here They Come. And we'll roll 3 die. And we get 3 3s, so nothing. So it didn't do us any good. And that's the turn. We draw an empty chip. Put these guys aside. Oh, everybody goes 1. Well, that's not good. 1, 1, 1, and 1. Okay. Things are getting a little bit more tense. Not much else we can do as far... I think the only action we can really do, we could put forth a hero, or we could fire. And I think we're going to fire from our hand. So we're going to fire with the volley fires by rank here. And it's going to be... This guy has... He's got 1, he's got 2, he's got 2, he's got 2. All these guys have 2. The Zulus aren't doing great, but let's go ahead and we can look through this stack. Do any one of the horns... The left horn's taken a little more. So I think let's go after the right horn. And we can do that. Intelligence, we could look through there. So we're going to go after the right horn. That's not the right horn. That's the wrong horn. That's the loins. Right horn right down here. And we got 5 against him. And we got nothing. All that, and we got nothing. Okay. That was our action. We can go to our hand, and we can draw. We get hook. And we can put forth a hero. Do Brummud again, and we're going to roll it. We're going to do the volley fire, present fire. And I think we'll roll it a 3. Let's do it again against this guy. Okay, well, that was a little better. So we move, we take 1 and he moves back 1. So we can discard that. That was our hero move forward thing. So that's the end of turn. We're going to pull. Okay, Washing of the Spears. This is not good for the Zulus. So basically, look at the lowest number box occupied by an Ibutho and retreat every Ibutho on that same numbered box by 1 box. So our lowest number is 1. So any 1s we're going to move back. So he moves back and he moves back. And we can take that out of circulation. Okay. I might as well move someone forward here. Let's move Windridge to my... Let's move Hook to my hand. Or to my heroes. I keep saying that. Yeah, it's kind of to the table. I guess we're moving him to the table. That's where he's going. So, okay, there he goes. We draw a card. And we got Dalton. Now... Dalton he kind of helps the storehouse. We can also discard chips with him. I don't know if that is any in the... I think this is any in the whole box, so we could do that. That's not a bad idea. Let's move him forward. Put him forth. And then we're going to use his heroic action to discard him. Now that means I can go through anywhere in here and we can discard 1. That's how I see it. Well, we'll see what the worst is. The worst is that move ahead by 3 would be a bad one. So if we can pull one of those, this one's kind of bad and this one's bad for us. So this one could be kind of nasty too. Okay, I think we're going to move this, but we're going to take this one out of circulation. So we can move all these guys back. Okay. Now an action. Not much I can do. Oh wait, no, that was the end of turn. I'm sorry. Okay, go back to the we're back to the beginning of turn. Kind of lost my place there. One for the left horn. Moves him into place. We will return to, we'll send us down here. And then we'll check our, let's see, our heroes. I think at this point, I think I'm going to go ahead and sacrifice Born. And in doing so, I think I'm going to use the his 4 roll here. So we're going to send him to the Boneyard, and we're going to use that 4 roll. Ugh, nothing. Oh, man. He sacrificed himself for nothing. Okay. We go to our hand, and we draw a card, and we get Adendorf. And Adendorf, basically what Adendorf, if you discard him, he can dilute your Impy Cup a little bit. So we could get some really crummy Impy chits and put them back. But at this point, I don't think there's much else. Okay, and then we're going to, oops, I accidentally drew Night Fighting. Okay, we know Night Fighting starts next turn, so. I think it's time to sacrifice Brummid. So we're going to go ahead and sacrifice him for a 4 roll. And we roll 4, and we get a 6. So that takes this guy out. Not quite what I wanted, but it'll work. And that ends the turn. Okay, go to an Impy phase. Impy's -1 for the loins. Or 1 for the loins, I'm sorry, not -1. So we can move him forward by 1. Okay. Let's check our heroes. Hooks. Oh, Hook, I can move Hook into the hospital. That's what I'll do. It's unburning, so we're going to play Hook as his action and place the marker. So he's now guarding the hospital, and I'll just place him down here. Okay, then we go to our hand, and the hand was the night turn, so we can flip this over. Now we have a -1 die roll modifier. We need to light something on fire, and we can discard that. And I'll play Adendorf to my hand, or to the table. Won't do anything with him yet, though. Okay, next turn we pull from our Impy. And we get, both horns move forward. So this one goes, and this guy goes. Okay, we go to our, maybe our heroes get to do something. Our hand, nothing there. At this point, I think Chard, we're going to have Chard go. So we're going to send Chard to the Boneyard. Chard dies, and we get a roll of 3, and then nothing. Oh my gosh, these guys are rolling terrible. Okay. They do draw a card to pop that chap. Okay. And I forgot my -1 also on there. Okay, and then we can put a 4th a hero to the table. And he can go forward now. It gives us a +1 DRM to a single non-volley die roll. So that can be fighting a fire, yes, yeah. Okay. And that ends the turn. Okay, Impy gets to go. And we get 2 from the chest. Now, he's going to be, he's going to run up against Hook. So if we get a 4 or 5, at this point I think, okay, here's where I'm going to use my going to use Windridge here. So Windridge, we return to the hand. And that then I have a plus 1. So basically we roll 2 die. I think it's 2. Let's double check here. My heroes. Roll 1 die. Okay, roll 1 die. So if we roll 1 die and we get a 3, 4, or 5, these guys can't move. So we roll it and we get a 2. So unfortunately, Hook is removed from there, and he goes back to just playing normal stuff. And then this guy gets to move ahead to 1, 2. Oh, things are looking bad. Okay, then we can pull something for our hand. Look to your front, and we can play forward Windridge. Which I think is about my only... Let's see who my heroes are. Hook. He could stop... We could play him to stop somebody, which we could do. Adendorf, not much good. So basically, only thing I can really do is move Windridge forward 1. Or move him back to my... put him forth as a hero, and then... sacrifice him for a roll of 2. So he dies, and we roll 2, and we get well, there's a 6. So I was going to go with the higher one here. We'll put that to the... I should have told who I was shooting at. Okay, I'll just go with the higher one. And that's the end of turn. Okay. We'll pull a chit. And we get the, this is the forward. Move the Indiluengue Ibutho forward 2 boxes. And that's 1 and 2. And that ends the game with the British losing. So, actually that wasn't too bad of a game. It kind of was a medium length. Sometimes you play this and it'll get really short. Like 2 moves. I've seen it 2, 3 moves, and it's over for the British. If the Zulus draw the right chips before they can do anything. But that's it. Like I said, it's kind of a long explanation for a short game, but the nice thing is you can whip 2 or 3 of these out in an hour as a solitaire game. I don't know if there's a lot of maybe player agency in this game. It's pretty luck driven, but I mean that's most solitaire games. I also didn't use the reserve platoon, which kind of helps. I think they could have made the reserve platoon just a little bit stronger for all the contortions you have to do to get there. It seems like it's kind of a one and done, and there's actually cards that are just as good in your regular hand that don't take quite as much action to do, but that's pretty much it. Anyway, that's what I've got for the week. Again, thanks for watching. I really appreciate it, and we will talk to you later. Bye.